You've spent an entire career fighting fires and rescuing the injured, sick, and dying. But that's all over now. What do you do when the sirens stop, you've hung up your gear, and you walk out of the firehouse for the last time? What do you do with your life when the smoke clears? Welcome back to When the Smoke Clears. I'm Russell Miles. I'm here with Tony Ben-Cosme. Thank you again for joining us for another interview with someone who has spent their career in the fire service and has lived to tell the tale. And just wanted to let you all know before we get into it that now you can see all of our smiling faces on YouTube.
Absolutely.
Yes, the When the Smoke Clears podcast, our old episodes, some of our old episodes, it's audio only, but now we are having our video stream put up on YouTube so you can see us talking into the mic and interacting with our guests and all that good stuff. So check out When the Smoke Clears on YouTube. There's a few other podcasts called When the Smoke Clears, so you may have to wade through them. But when the smoke finally does clear, hopefully you will find ours.
Well, there's a if you put in WSC When the Smoke Clears, that should link you up pretty good. And you should get they should come up pretty fast for you.
Yeah, so hopefully you can find it and you can enjoy our episodes that way. And in the description at the bottom of each of our episodes, there is a link to our online store where you can buy your When the Smoke Clears merch, hats, shirts, hoodies, mugs, whatever you like. Just check the description on every episode of When the Smoke Clears on YouTube, and the link will be there. Click on it and you can get whatever you like. Or if you work with either Tony or myself, find us and we'll hook you up and we'll make sure you get what you want to get. And so with all that being said, Tony, tell us who we've got on the show with us today.
Yeah, thank you, Russ. Our next guest, I've known this one for a long time. I've learned a lot from her. She was my supervisor for a little bit back in the 90s. She was very instrumental in some of the development stuff that I did, especially the EMS stuff that I needed to learn, and just how to deal with people. She was real good with that. She was one of the first females that I worked with in the fire department, and she was one of the ones that I knew that had this stuff on straight and knew what she was doing and didn't take any mess. She's retired as Division Chief, 30 years of service. She retired in 2018. She was a paramedic, and she basically came through the system, ordinary ops, just a regular firefighter doing everyday stuff. With further ado, I'm going to introduce this person. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being with us, Diane Zuspan.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
All right.
Yeah. Thank you very much for joining us. And I know it was kind of tricky to get this interview nailed down because you've been traveling the world, I understand.
I have.
Yeah, where are you coming to us from today?
Well, today I'm coming from Washington, D.C. home, but I just got back from the North Pole.
Look at
North
that.
Pole.
So
we're going to send you with some swag so you can like a little When the Smoke Clears flag so you can just put them in everywhere you go.
I was up with the polar bears.
All right. That must have been exciting.
Very cool.
That's awesome. Cool. Awesome. So as you know, you've heard the show before. We like to get a little introduction from our guests, like how they grew up, how they came up. So please tell us a little bit about where you were born and how you came up and what was life like for you coming up.
Okay, so I was born in Massachusetts, New Bedford, Massachusetts, which is about 60 miles south of Boston. Grew up in suburbia, went to Catholic school my whole life. After graduating high school, I moved to the city of Boston to go to college at Boston College and lived there during college and then for 4 years after that. And then I moved to California, to San Francisco, and lived there for a year, then moved to Monterey, California, where I was for 2 years.
Like Monterey.
Love Monterey. Worked in Santa Cruz County as the first set of medics that were when they put ALS into Santa Cruz County, which was
Oh wow,
really
California.
neat. Then moved to Waco, Texas, or actually Killeen, Texas, Fort Hood. And at that point, I became a paramedic in Waco, Texas, which was very interesting also. And then ended up moving to Washington, D.C., and came here as a paramedic. Well, came to the area as a paramedic and said, I want to get a job as a paramedic. And where do I go? And I lived in Wheaton at the time, and I would work out at the track at Wheaton High School.
Okay.
And the firefighters would come there to Wheaton High, the guys from 18. So I was like, well, I got to figure this out, because the other thing that was different for me was every time I passed a fire station, it said volunteer on it. So I was very confused by that, because I didn't want to volunteer. I wanted a job, and I was like, are they only volunteer? So I started talking to them and asking them how the system works and what do I do and things like that. So they were really great. They basically told me, here's how do you apply, and that it's not only volunteers, it's career also. And so back in 1988, I applied to the fire department, mainly because I wanted to be a paramedic, and you can't just be a paramedic in Montgomery County. But also I had been a medic for 6 years or so. And I thought, what a great new challenge to be a firefighter. I had never thought about it as a kid, never even entered my mind. But once it was brought up that that's what I need to do to get working, I was like, I thought it was going to be a great challenge. And it was a very good challenge. I entered the academy at the age of 30.
Wow.
So that was not easy to enter at the age of 30.
Right.
And then my career started there.
Okay. Well, we're gonna rewind a little bit because you said a lot right
You
there.
did.
Sorry.
No
Give us the
problem.
clip
No
notes.
problem. So, you said you grew up in Massachusetts, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. What was life like growing up in Massachusetts?
Oh, I grew up near the water. My mom didn't work, dad worked, traveled a lot for work. I had 2 sisters and a brother. And I was my older sister became a nurse. My brother became a lawyer. My younger sister is a business person. And here I was being kind of the offset black sheep of the family, becoming a firefighter. However, my parents thought it was one of the coolest things. Like anytime I was with them and the fire truck would, I was visiting in Massachusetts and a fire truck would go by or an ambulance would go by, they'd be like, that's you. And I'm like, yeah, that's me. It is me. So it was I don't think it was what they planned or expected for me, but they were very supportive of it.
Okay. Now, you said that growing up, I don't know if this was when you were a little girl or as you were coming into college, you said you didn't have any thoughts about joining the fire department,
I did
right?
not. And actually, I went to college and I studied biology, thought I'd go pre-med, and figured out in college that I didn't want to do another 4 years and more to become a doctor. So I graduated college kind of looking for what to do. I worked in a hospital for a little bit as like an aide, and then I became an EMT in Boston. I try and think back of like what made me think of that, but I knew I wanted to do something medical. And so I became an EMT. And at that point, when I was still in Boston, they had this new thing called EMTI intermediate. So I took that, and I worked for a private ambulance company in Boston that did some 911 work when the Boston ambulances got too busy. And in Boston, it's not a fire department service for their ambulances. It's it is a city service, but it's a third service. So I didn't really work with firefighters very much then.
Okay.
So when I went out to California, and the reason I moved so much was I was married before, and he was in the military, or he went to med school and then was in the military, so they assigned him.
Okay. All
Well,
right.
so it wasn't my choice to go to California, but I
Gotcha.
was like, San Francisco sounds nice. So while in San Francisco, I looked into the paramedic program at Stanford Hospital. They had one. So
Okay.
I went there, I didn't work in San Francisco. I went to paramedic school back then, and we were only there a year. So then when we left San Francisco and went to Monterey, I was looking for a paramedic job. And it just so happened that Santa Cruz County was starting their their ALS program. They had EMTs, and this was once again a private service, but they did all the 911 work. So there were 8 paramedics to start the ALS service, and we were treated like gold because we were like, oh my God, we have paramedics now. What a great group of people to work with, and did that for 2 years and really enjoyed doing 911 work and being a paramedic.
Okay. Do you remember one of the calls down there in Monterey, practicing as a paramedic, that made you really think like, wow, this is what I want to do?
So, it's such a different place. Like, everyone was big surfing. It's a big surfing town. And the way it was structured is there were 3 stations in the county. One was in the middle of the city, quote unquote. It's not a very big city. And then one was kind of in the suburbs, and one was in the rural area of the county. But I can't remember necessarily one call. We ran a lot of beach calls. But I remember the camaraderie that we had, the 8 of us together. And so it was basically, you worked with the same partner, and you actually rotated through the 3 stations. So one shift would be at one station, one shift the next. And the camaraderie we had was fantastic. And I enjoyed the challenge of coming up to a chaotic scene and bringing some reason and calm to that, to being able to handle that. So I really enjoyed that aspect of paramedicine. I also like talking to patients, but it really was something to say, you know what, I went up to that, car accident that, there's people hanging out, and I was calm enough to handle it and to bring order to that chaos. And I really enjoyed that aspect of being a paramedic.
Nice.
So
what year was this when you were doing that?
you're gonna tell me. I was in it's okay. I was in Santa Cruz in to San Francisco in 85. Then we moved toward the end of 85 to Monterey. 85 and 86 were in Santa Cruz, and then 86, 87, and part of 88 was in Texas.
Okay. And you said that you and the rest of your colleagues basically helped get that paramedic program off the ground. Like, you were the first ones.
Right.
So what was paramedicine like back then?
It really wasn't all that different. We might have had to call the hospital more we had less standing orders. I think there was some type of, we had to prove to the ER docs that we could make good decisions on the street. So we would call in for orders more often than we did toward the end of my paramedic career. But we were treated like gold because we were they thought we were the coolest thing ever. Even the EMTs were like, oh my God, like all the stuff that they can do. And basically, medicine constantly changes. But we were doing everything. We were intubating, we were, defibrillating, we were doing all that. We carried a slew of drugs. I did treat a shark bite one time. That's the only time I've treated a shark bite.
Shark bite.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, they're a big surfing community. So
Gotcha.
Yeah, that was fun.
Okay, cool. So you're there for about a year or so, and then you moved to Texas?
Yeah. So my ex was Fort Hood in
Fort Hood.
Killeen, which
Yep.
was a culture shock for a Yankee girl.
Oh yeah, I've been there. I've been to Fort Hood. Nothing there. But yeah, go ahead.
Nothing there.
Mhm.
And then I'm looking for a job in that area as a paramedic. And we were about 50 minutes south of Waco, I guess it was.
Mhm.
And so Waco was similar in that it was a private ambulance company that did all the 911 work for the county. So once again, no affiliation with the fire department. We would see them maybe on a car accident, but they weren't doing even, first responder work. The fire department wasn't. So it was just a third service. So not too familiar with fire departments throughout the beginning of my career.
Gotcha. So you're kind of working adjacent to the fire department, but you don't have anything to do with what they're doing.
Right.
Yeah,
And there
no.
wasn't that much overlap even, we didn't see them other than like they didn't really know us. We didn't really know them. We'd see them on maybe an accident, but there was no relationship really.
Gotcha.
So
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay.
there were two different services completely. It looked like.
completely separate services.
Yeah. So you're down in Texas, you're working down there as a paramedic, and then move back to the DC area. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
So my ex was then at Walter Reed.
Yes, the old Walter Reed in DC. Yeah.
The old Walter Reed in DC. So that was his
Yeah.
next assignment. So we came here and like I said, I lived just north of Glenmont, Station 18.
Mm-hmm.
And so then trying to figure out my job, like I said, I came here and was confused about seeing volunteer on every fire station, driving by and just seeing the name, not knowing anything about it. So I, like I said, the guys that came to work out at Wheaton High when I was there doing my running and stuff they gave me all the information that I, needed as to how the system works. Like, I'm like, can I get paid? Can I just be a paramedic? I had all those questions and didn't really know who to ask. So the fact that I ran into them and they were very, gracious on giving me all the information really helped me decide, okay, my next step then, because I want to be a paramedic, is I'm going to join the fire department.
Okay.
So very different than a lot of people who thought about it as children. And
no, it's quite a decision.
It was quite a decision. And like I said,
30 years old. Yeah.
30 years old going into the academy.
Yeah.
That was not easy.
That's a testament to yourself, thinking that you can, I'm going to try this. I'm just going to go ahead and give it a shot. Most people don't want to do anything like that.
I kind of went in blind, though. Maybe that helped.
Maybe that helped.
I didn't really know, okay, the academy. And I'm like, well, whatever, I'll try it. And didn't really know how, especially because, the academy was such, especially back then, where they would just scream and yell at you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm not 18. I've had jobs. I don't need to be torn down to be brought up. Like I came in from a different perspective.
Yes.
And a lot of the people that were in the recruit class with me, but there were, like I said, there were 8 to 10 women in my recruit class, which was so helpful.
Yes, a lot at that time.
I think about the poor women when, that have one woman, like the camaraderie in the locker room amongst the women really got us all through it. Putting up with all the yelling and screaming and physically so demanding, that
Right.
we would go into the locker room and, the camaraderie really, really helped.
Nice.
Get through that experience.
So you got hired. What year was that? And that had to be after transition, right? Montgomery
That
County.
was 1988. We were recruit class 3.
Recruit class 3.
That was, so they had 3 recruit classes in 1 year.
Oh, okay.
So they had started one in January, and then I don't know when the next one, but ours started the end of November.
Okay.
So yeah, so we started in,
All right. So go ahead. So you finished recruit class. You're a recruit class, and that's at that time it's about 3 months, right? 2.5 months.
No, it was 6. I think it was 6 months. So 18 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
All Okay.
So it
All
was
right.
a long. It seemed even longer. But
Yeah, and that's the old academy at
the old academy.
because we have the new one. Yeah, that's
I had DeHaven. I had McCarty. I had who else? I think those are the Jerry Warren. Warren
Yeah.
and DeHaven, I think, were the two. Like they split the class, and each one led one section of the class. But I mean, I just remember being so physically spent at the end of each day. But we pulled it through.
Oh no, absolutely.
Yeah, made
So
it happen.
Made it happen.
you finish your recruit class. What's your first station? Where do you get stationed at?
I went to Station 25 to behind 7-Eleven.
Oh,
Old Station 25.
that's
Old Station 25.
it's a little. We don't even use it anymore. It's
I
belongs to
think they
someone
made
else.
it a homeless shelter, which
Yeah,
I kind of found
there's a
weird.
lot, right?
But so I went to 25, a pretty small station. It had an engine, a truck, and a medic unit.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had never been and really worked in another station, so I didn't necessarily know, gee, this is really bad. And once again, the camaraderie of the station and the shift. And the other thing about my career is I only spent it on A shift.
Oh, really?
Is really weird, right? So so I went to 25A, and the guys were great. I mean, Charlie Sisson and Dennis DiBenedetto and who else? Levere Edens were all on my shift and really were very welcoming. It was a pretty easy transition to that. Like no one was really, looking down on me or giving me a hard time, other than, you have to answer the phone in 2 rings or something like that when you're the rookie. But other than that, it was great. And, that station was very busy. So we were constantly on the road a lot, right south of Leisure World.
Still the same.
Especially as the paramedic unit. So I really went straight to a paramedic unit. And in those days, you didn't really get off the paramedic unit.
No, you stayed on it. There were a handful of medics. I mean, there wasn't that many medics, and they couldn't just spread them around willy-nilly.
So we did. So I really, I mean, other than in training, we would go train and we'd pull hose and do all that stuff and, go back to take the rookie test at the end. But I never really rode the fire trucks for that part of my career. So when I was there till I think 91 is when I moved out of 25.
Where'd you go at?
Although I did meet my husband at 25. So.
Oh, okay. Yes, you're right. Your husband, Jay Zuspan.
Yes.
All right. We'll get to him in another podcast.
Oh, another podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I left 25 and went to 23.
Okay.
And one of the things that I recall so vividly is my last call at 25 was a double fatal child fire in the middle of the day. And so everyone was there. It was a garden apartment, and the guys from 23 were there, and I knew I was going to 23, and we were working the 2 kids on the front lawn and trying to get them into helicopters and things like that. And I was driving to where the helicopter was going to land. And as I drove out, all the apparatus was so tight in there, and I scraped the mirror of my medic unit along truck 23. So when I got to 23, I obviously filled in all the necessary reports and stuff. But when I got to 23, I came with that reputation of scraped their truck with my mirror.
Right.
So it was quite the introduction, because my next shift was at 23 after that.
Did you get promoted there, or how did you?
No, I didn't get promoted. I actually left because my husband and I were dating, and we didn't want to be at the same station, and we weren't supposed to be.
Right.
So I was the one. So there was an opening at 23, and I went there on A shift again.
You stayed on A shift.
I stayed on A shift, and I was at station 23 for a very long time.
Yeah, I know. That's why I met you at 23.
Yeah. So I went
Yeah.
there in 91, and I can't recall the year I left, but I was there like 8 or 9 years at
Yeah, yeah.
23 on A shift.
Yeah, you were there a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember you being there for a while. Yeah. So what do you think? I mean, because you go from California to Texas to here. I mean, through Boston, of course, and you're just every step you go, you just kind of amp it up. You just add one more. You just keep climbing the ladder as far as your skill set, what you can do, and how further out you're going on this deal. Because I'm sure when you started, you didn't think you were going to go this far, but you just keep I did this, and you just keep going. So, what was the difference between your thought process from being a medic over here to be a medic in California to being an American medic here in Maryland? I know no different medical standards, and what they can and cannot do is different. How much medication they can give. I mean,
Yes.
what kind of medication, what they're authorized to do and what they're not, standing orders. Maybe in California they have more, so then we have less in Maryland because the medical director is a little more strict. What exactly was the difference?
There was quite a difference, and I remember, when you go from one place to the other, you don't want to be the person who's at the new place going, "Oh, we didn't do it like that. We did it another way," because but there were differences, and that, like, I remember, I think when I came to Maryland, I think at that point they needed to get an order to do like an albuterol nebulizer or something, like, or they were just getting albuterol on the medic units in Maryland, and we had it for years in Texas. So things like that. But like I said, you don't want to come to the new place and be like, "Oh, we were doing that. What's wrong with you guys? You weren't, doing as much as we were." So you try and just adapt to the situation that you're in without too much negative commentary. It's very similar, although the big change was the fire department, right? Because I'd always worked in a third service. The 911 work is pretty much the same no matter where you go.
Same type of
Same time.
injuries.
I mean, in Texas was a little bit different. But like, I remember my first accident, and it was a pickup truck, and they had a gun rack in the back window, and I was flipping out because I had never seen that open carry of guns. And so I was like, "He's got guns," and they're like, "Yeah, so what?" Like, so just getting used to the culture in different places was a little bit different. But the 911 work is 911 work. Like, people have the same type of emergencies everywhere you go.
Mm-hmm.
So that wasn't that much of a challenge anymore. I mean, it really got to be like, when the bells went off, it was not like, "Oh my God, I'm so nervous. What am I going to see? What am I going to, like, I'm not going to be able to handle this." After 6 years doing it, you're like, I can pretty much handle whatever. And so the challenge of entering the fire department brought a whole new set of skills that I had never done before. And that was where the challenge came in.
Okay. All right. So you're at 23, and you're basically riding a medic unit. That's all they had there before they put an ambulance in there. And,
right. We had no ambulance when I was there.
No ambulance there. So
I
you
think
ran a lot of calls.
the month I left.
Yeah, it was pretty busy.
Yes, very busy. However, I don't know, 23A shift was a fantastic shift.
Yeah, I know.
So great. Griff Livingston, run by Griff Livingston, Fred Rising, Steve Edney. Oh my God. They had a lot of fun at work, at other people's expense sometimes, at each other's expense sometimes. You had to have, and that was before they had a female bathroom at Station 23.
Oh boy.
Oh, wow.
So I was the first female there. So in the morning, when everyone gets up and wants to go to the bathroom, I have to like wait till they're all done. And then I'm knocking on the door, like, "Let me in."
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, there was no separate shower, no separate even toilet. There was just the men's locker room. So, they were a great group of guys. You had to put up with a lot of hijinks, but never ever there did I feel like there was any bad karma toward me because I was a woman or anything like that. No, you were treated like one of the shift.
Right.
So that meant you had to be able to take a joke, certainly, but never at like my expense where I thought someone was attacking me.
Right.
So, we had a great time there. However, an interesting thing happened in that. So I went over there and I got my Fire 3 status. I got my wagon driver status. They worked with me, no problem helping me get my engine driver status. And then I became a Fire 3. And then I took the test for Master Lieutenant, and you take the same test, right?
Yeah, both.
The lieutenant has an oral component, so I took it and I ended up on qualified for master and well qualified for lieutenant. So I got promoted from Fire 3 to lieutenant.
Wow.
Skipped master and stayed at the same station.
Now that's crazy.
Went over the person who was the master.
Ooh.
Yeah, no. Yeah, Fred Rising.
No, Alan. So I say this like Alan Marcus was the
master.
The master medic. And so I was at Fire 3 one day, and the next day I come in and I'm the lieutenant medic.
Okay, just to explain a little bit.
Yeah.
At that time, because this predates Russ here.
Okay.
There was a kind of another way to promote up on the medic side. Not another way, but just the way you could do it.
Not then. It was the same process.
So you couldn't become a lieutenant medic. There wasn't
there was a lieutenant. Well, you would become a lieutenant and be assigned to a medic unit.
Right.
But the test for lieutenant, fire or medic was
they were the same tests, but it did help that you were qualified to be a medic.
There was a lieutenant medic spot.
Yes.
That I went into.
Right. So you could be a medic and then you automatically jumped up past other people because that's what the spot was open and you were filling that spot.
The fact that I was only qualified, like they made master medic promotions, but they hadn't gotten down to the qualified list.
Right.
Right. But then they were making lieutenant medic positions, and I was higher on that list. I was well qualified. So they went through the well qualified list. So I got promoted to that before I ever got off the master.
That still happens today, actually.
Does it happen today? I couldn't remember that.
I mean, it still happens. Not that much, but.
Well, the other problem was, not problem, but I stayed at the same station.
That's not.
However,
It
really, it's probably the only station where it wouldn't create a huge problem. And the egos weren't, like it was kind of a joke that it happened, but I never felt like they were trying to undermine me or bring me down or anything like that. Even though like they understood that's how the system worked. And, I was happy to stay there. They seemed happy to keep me there. So probably one of the only places where egos didn't necessarily get in the way.
Well, it sounds like a real testament to your shifts.
It was. Fantastic shifts.
Well, Griff ran a tight ship, so
he ran a tight shift.
Yes, he didn't. He would tell you straight up. If there was an issue.
Yeah, there was.
He didn't mince words at all.
Which I like that style of leadership.
Oh, it was good. You knew exactly where you stand. You know exactly where you stand.
Exactly.
Yeah, he was pretty good. He would critique, but he would also give praise, and he was fair. I thought.
I think it was very fair.
Yeah.
If you mess up, you had to watch out because he was coming and saying and going to tell you. But there's not necessarily anything wrong with that because he didn't do it in a mean and nasty way. He did it as like teaching way.
Right.
Right.
So you're a lieutenant there, and you basically were almost your supervisor on the medic unit. But when do you promote out of there? You take the captain's exam?
Yeah. So there was no such thing as a captain medic position. But, here I am coming in, and my shift mates at 23 really, did try and include me in all the training and all this. And I did drive the fire truck every now and again at that point. And I was on the apparatus. I think there was one thing where they came up with this thing, oh, you have to be rotated off like every third shift and you got to ride fire apparatus instead of the medic unit. So I did get some experience on the fire. Really, that was my first real experience on the fire side, like actually doing the work. And, you know, I would be in a position sometimes where I was the officer on the engine at 23. It was rare, but that was how, you know, that's how it was, because now I'm in a lieutenant position. And when I rotated onto the fire trucks, I was in the lieutenant position still, which was, you know, I never, they always had my back, but like the paramedic part came like second nature. I didn't even have to think. Like I knew what to do. And the fire side, I still was like, okay, when I get, like, I'm thinking on the way, when I have to think a lot more about what I'm going to do, what's going to happen, etc. So it was way more challenging and, you know, a little nerve wracking, but I was very glad. I was kind of glad I did it with people I knew so well and who knew me so well. Like if I had gone to a new station as a lieutenant medic and got put on a fire truck with people who I don't even know, that would have been more challenging, because I knew these guys knew where I came from and were more than happy to support me.
Yes.
It worked out well for me.
Now that's really good. And I have a question kind of along that same line. So I got hired in 2005, and I remember that was kind of the tail end of there being lieutenants assigned to medic units.
Right.
And I remember there sometimes was some open hostility towards medics.
Yeah.
Especially when they were officers, or even when they were riding fire apparatus. And I know you said that you spent a lot of your career since you came in as a medic assigned to the medic unit, and I'm sure you got time on the fire truck, but it sounds like you did most of your time on the medic unit. Do you think that, I guess, some of that hostility was justified in some way? Like, did you see, like, either yourself or other medics who promoted to officers struggle as they transitioned to riding fire trucks?
I did see people struggle, and I think some of it came, some of the backlash that people had, and there were people who got backlash. Some of it, you know, has to do with how you go into the station, in my opinion. So I was lucky. I went into the station with people who knew me. But if I was going to a new station and I'm now the medic who's riding the fire truck, and I don't have, you know, as much experience, you know, 10 years of riding fire trucks behind me. If I go in and I'm like, okay, I'm the officer now, and I'm going to tell you guys what to do. And, you know, you go in with attitude, like I'm the boss, you know, sometimes it backfires in that, you know, as opposed to going in and saying, hey, look, guys, you know, here I am. I'm sure, you know, I was a medic, and I studied my butt off for the test, and you know, my practical experience might not be what yours is, but I feel I'm knowledgeable. I'm going to give it my all. And here we go, as opposed to me saying, I'm the boss now, I'll tell you what to do. So I think some of the backlash was attitude that people have when they became an officer. Like they thought, oh, I'm the officer, they can't tell me what to do anymore. And I'm not saying they need to tell you what to do, but I'm saying it's more, you know, it's more of a we situation rather than an I situation.
Yeah.
So I do think some people did get backlash, and, you know, well, and it brings me to my next step, where I took the captain's test. And so now, no such thing as captain medic. So now I'm going to a fire station where I don't know anybody. Oh, I got transferred. I became a captain and got promoted to 24. They had never had a female on their shift. They had never had a medic officer on their shift, because it didn't have a medic unit there. So they didn't have any medics. And so here I am going into that situation of, like, I told them after I was there for a while that I would have loved to hear around the kitchen table talk the couple of shifts before I got there.
Right.
Right. Because I'm sure they were very skeptical.
Of course.
Yes.
Love, like, oh my God, not only it's a woman, but, and they had experience not on their shift specifically, but with working with other women in the fire service, some good, some bad. But when you're a woman in the fire service, you have to fight their notion of what you're going to be. Like they had, and one of the masters told me one time that they had a lieutenant paramedic come in, female, and ride the seat of he was driving, ride the seat of the engine. And he said, the first thing she did is looked over to me and said, so what do you want me to do? And he's like, oh my God. Like, so now I'm fighting that stereotype that he already has.
Yeah.
Of, he's expecting, I'm a woman, I'm a paramedic, I'm coming in, I'll be like, I don't know what I'm doing. And that's not how it was. And so I have to fight that. I said to him, I wasn't particularly thrilled with women in the fire service who were not doing their job well, because that's what I have to fight, because people lump in all women in the fire service, because there weren't that many of us back then, or even now. But,
right.
I think their experience clouds their vision of what you're going to be.
Yeah. They have one bad experience with
Right.
one woman, and now all women are
exactly.
And I'm glad that people are going to listen to this podcast and hear you and see you and see that, use you as a template on how to make sure they don't do those things and learn.
Yeah. Hopefully you, and I really do feel like, looking back at 24, the guys were fantastic, and it was a wonderful place to work. It was, I really feel like I lucked out in positions that I got in the fire service, like at 23 and 24, and the people I worked with. There are extraneous people who were in my career that were against women in the fire service, but I would say none of them were the guys I worked with on a regular basis, which was, I think, lucky for me. They were in neighboring stations and things like that, but I happened to get with guys who, and I do think it's the type of situation where if you prove yourself competent, you'll be accepted.
Right.
Yeah.
Whether you're a woman or not, like, what I'm saying? Like, they wanted to see how it was going to be. And I proved myself competent. And so therefore they were accepting and welcoming.
Yeah. I think being good at whatever it is that you do, for the vast majority of people, like, that levels the playing field right there.
Right.
Yeah. Unless they are just hell bent on treating you bad just because you're different and it doesn't matter what you do.
Right.
I think if you're good, that'll.
Yeah. There are those people in the fire department that will, some of the comments I heard about, during my career were, amazing to me, that they would just think that, well, I'll give you an example. When I was at 24 and we were dispatched to a house fire, it was a fairly basic room and contents fire. And obviously other engines and trucks from different stations were there. And so I was with Jerry Bass, and Jerry and I went into the house with the hose line and we put the fire out. It wasn't anything really challenging. It was kind of nuts and bolts.
Bread and butter, yeah.
And we came out, and one of the comments from an officer on another fire truck was, he came up to me and said, "Oh my God, you did such a fantastic, wow, I didn't know you could do that." I'm like, I'm a captain in the fire department. And he had no expectation that I could do my job. None.
That's
and so when I did it, he was shocked. That's crazy.
Yeah.
What a low bar he had set.
That is a low bar.
Yeah, I could have just sat on the front lawn and twiddled my thumbs, I guess, because that's what he's expecting me to do. But it was amazing to me that he was so amazed that I put out a room and contents fire.
Well, like we say all the time, just do what you do and
Right.
the rest of that'll take care of itself. You know what I'm saying? You know, that'll.
But that's it. Like I said, no one I worked with directly on my shift were like that, but there are quite a number of them in the fire department.
Yeah.
So you just decide to, not pay attention to that.
Yeah.
That's what I do.
Just do what you can do and keep it moving, and
Exactly.
That's it.
yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Gotcha. So you're at 24, you're the captain there, and again, it sounds like you had a great experience.
I did.
Great experience there.
Battalion 1. Yeah.
Yep.
Battalion 1, A shift again. I don't know why.
Again. Now, how long were you at 24?
Probably 4 years or so. I can't remember the exact date I went to 24, but about 4 years as the captain there. Became the station commander when the station commander retired. So about 4 or 5 years there.
Gotcha. And so at what point did you decide, hey, I want to keep moving up? So,
entering the fire department at the age of 30, I knew I could not do 30 years riding a fire truck. I'm going to hit an 8. It's a young person's job. It really is. And so I knew my career path couldn't be just to stay on fire trucks for my whole career, because it was going to be cut short if I did. So I'd always thought I'm going to get into an administrative position and that will extend my career. And it did for 10 more years. Like I did 20 years in the field and 10 in administration. So I knew I was going to promote, and at that time, my plan was to get off fire trucks at the age of 50. And I was maybe 49, just turned 49. And someone called me from headquarters and said, there's a captain's position opening up on the 12th floor. And I was like, it wasn't my plan. I wasn't ready to leave. I wasn't done with the fire trucks yet. But I also thought to myself, is this opportunity going to be there when I want it to be there? Exactly when I want it to be there. So I put in for it. It was there used to be a captain's position in administrative services.
Right.
So I decided to, throw my plan out the window and go to headquarters a year early. And I took the captain's position in administrative services. And it was mostly dealing with labor relations and discipline. That's what that captain's job mostly dealt with at that point. So it was a whole new world of, it's kind of like you got to see how the sausage was made after when you go up to the 12th floor and you see all that goes into running the fire department, a fire department of this size. You really don't notice it. You just take it for granted, I guess, when you're on the streets. But when you go up to headquarters and you start seeing the inner workings and the complexity of running a department of this size, it really opens your eyes to a whole nother, world.
Yeah. Did you enjoy being up there doing that?
I did. I really did. It was, once again, I worked with great people. I worked with Wayne Courtney and Dave Steckel in that section. And had a great time. I mean, had to learn from the start. I really had never dealt with labor relations or disciplinary actions or anything like that. So, I mean, my whole first year was just learning so much and figuring out, how it works. So I really did enjoy that job. I missed, I would say that's when a lot of people leave the fire department and they're still running the streets, and that's what they miss. I probably mourned that part at that point, rather than I mourned leaving the streets then, as opposed to leaving the fire department. Yeah, if you understand.
Right. No, I understand.
Because it's a whole different world. It's not, you're not living together. You're not eating dinner together. You're not, going on really strenuous calls together and bonding over all that stuff. So the bonding and the family atmosphere, somewhat dissipates at that point because you're not doing that stuff anymore. So I did miss the streets. I missed, we'd hear the calls and we'd be like, oh, like, wanting to go still.
Want to
So
go on them, yeah.
it's kind of, maybe it's easier because it's a step down. Like I don't just go from the streets to nothing. I went from the streets to administration to nothing, or to retirement. I shouldn't say nothing, right? So that it kind of let me down a little more gently, probably, than a lot of people.
Yeah.
So you're there and you're a captain. I remember that, the captain position. What made you become a battalion chief? What because are they going to get rid of that position, or what happened?
They talked about getting rid of the position, and I think that's when they did get rid of it. I think I was the last one in that position. And so then, I always thought I would like to keep promoting up. I enjoyed what I was doing. So I was like, well, let's take the next step. So I took the battalion chief test and became a battalion chief, and was assigned to the battalion chief of EMS at that point. Under Mike McAdams was the assistant chief of EMS, and I was the battalion chief. And so for a while it was all office. And then, the department went through various schedules of, okay, now all the battalion chiefs have to go out and ride in the field for once a month, or whatever that was, whatever it is. So once again, it's a hairy position to be in, because now I'm out as the battalion chief in the field with, not all that much experience, 4 years as a captain. And now I've been in an office for a while, and now I'm back out on the street. And, there's arguments for and against doing that process. Right? And the department went through them several times of, oh, let's make them do that. Oh, let's not make them do that. Pros and cons of each. So, they thought it would help keep people's skills up. But once a month, what's the chances you're going to get on the big call that you actually have to, do this whole command structure? So I would ride out there sometimes and not run any big fires.
No.
So, that makes you nervous for when you do run the big fire, so, or it certainly puts in your head, like, hope I'm going to be able to handle this. And I studied a lot. I studied like so much. I would listen on my way home from work. I'd listen to the radio and listen to commands happen. Like, when anyone went to channel 3, and I'd be like, okay, I got to listen, because I got to like hear what they're doing and just keep myself current with the stuff, because I'm going to be out there and they're going to depend on me.
Yeah. Run the box alarm in your head. Yeah. Yeah.
So I became the battalion chief of EMS. I don't know what year.
No, don't worry about it. It's fine.
Yeah.
No, yeah. So you're the battalion chief of EMS. You're pretty much set there. What made you want to keep going up?
I don't know. I'm trying to think was Mike McAdams leaving? I don't know. I just kept saying, I'm just going to keep promoting. Someone once told me there's less people that can tell you what to do if you keep promoting.
That's true.
It's like, okay.
There you go.
So I took the assistant chief's test and passed that, and ended up being the assistant chief of EMS.
All right.
So it was a very easy transition at that point. But that was the time when we were going to electronic patient care reporting.
EPCR.
So I was the one that was responsible.
You brought EPCR to Montgomery County,
which was not easy, but yes. And the other thing about working on the 12th floor, working in administration, is it's really the first time that I worked with civilians, quote unquote. The administrative staff of the fire department, who, as you quickly learn, have a very different sense of humor than firefighters do.
Oh no. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Ours is very brash, I would say the least.
Yes, I always say this: fire department humor and regular people humor. And so you learn, like, you just think, oh, they're in the fire department, they are going to be just like us, and they're really not. You have to watch your sense of humor when you're working with the civilians, but worked with so many great civilians too. And there's a whole lot of support staff at the fire department that really are fantastic at what they do. I worked with COPAR very closely doing electronic patient care reporting.
Okay, I always had a question about that. How many? I mean, when we were doing that contract, how many options did we have to different computer systems, or whether the only one in town?
Well, and you know, the other thing you learn when you're in administration is how you procure a product through county government is so like set in its ways. In other words, legally, in other words, you have to put a quote, you have to put the proposal out, and then you have to wait so many times, and you have to go through the proposal, and then you can narrow it down, but there's set criteria and you cannot go away from that criteria, etc. So I think we probably had 8. A lot of people were chomping at the bit to get Montgomery County because it's such a big county. So these companies that were doing EPCR at the time would like, you know, be salivating over the fact that Montgomery County was looking at them because it's a big contract. Mm-hmm. So I think we started with like 7, and then we narrowed it down to 3, and then we actually went to places that used their system, so we could talk to the people that used it, see how they liked it. So one of the systems was used in Texas a lot. So I went back to Waco to because they were using the one of the EPCR systems that we were looking at. And we went to Corpus Christi Fire, and we went to San Antonio Fire. We're all using the one that we eventually picked. But I mean, it took like a year to pick a product and to get a contract. And, you know, then you have to train every single person in this because we were still using those, you know, forms that
EMS 100s. Yeah.
The EMS 100s. So it was a big project, but I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed doing it. And, you know, and I thought it was about time we got to that point in the fire department using an electronic instead of EMS 100s. So it was, yeah, it was a satisfying project to do.
Nice. Yeah. And so for any person who was hired, I don't know, the mid 2010s or have known nothing but the EPCRs prior to that, every single EMS report you did was on a physical piece of paper.
Yes, it
you had
was.
to call ECC to get your times
to get cleared. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You had to handwrite your entire narrative, the whole thing.
You did. Yes, you did.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, that was a good project. Worked heavily, obviously, with the IT staff of the fire department, which was great. And so it was, you know, at the time though, I was kind of fighting off the state. The state was just in the infancy of starting a electronic patient care report and hadn't even begun to do it. And so they wanted us to wait for them to, and they were like, we want the state form. I mean, we want you to be on board with the state. And we're like, So we were the first ones, I think, in the state that went EPCR, but we went with another company because we didn't want to wait for the state to come by. And then when the state did develop theirs, they kind of, you know, we ended up going to their system for whatever political reason that was.
Also, the system we do on it's the EPCR, it's the state system.
Correct. It's not the system that we originally started with.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That explains a lot.
Mine was better.
That explains a lot about, yes, the whole turning it blue from red.
Yes, that all changed when the state took over.
Wow.
And they went with a different vendor who we had, you know, looked at and chose a different one. But anyway.
Okay. I guess, you know, at the end of the day, you got to do whatever. Right.
Right. Well, then the state mandated that you did, or they were going to do something with funding, or, you know, it was going to be not pleasant.
Pretty straightforward.
Yes.
So you, out of all the stations, and you know, you that you worked at before, you would say 23 is your favorite. You would say.
Don't tell the guys at 24 that, but probably.
Okay.
I mean, and I was there for so long. I mean, they really became like family. Like we hung out off work together. I still talk to them, you know. So yeah, that was probably my favorite in that it's where I kind of really grew up and grew into the fire department in that at that shift. You know, because I'd been only 2 years at 25 as a rookie. And so they are the ones who really like molded me into the person that could become a lieutenant paramedic or a captain. They molded me into have the ability to do that. So I'm forever grateful for that.
It's good.
Yep.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good.
So go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, so you battalion chief, then you're assistant chief.
Chief, yep.
Right. What makes you want to go to division chief?
I told you, less people could tell me what to do.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. I don't know. I didn't want to just deal with EMS, and that the battalion chief, and the assistant chief of EMS deals with only the EMS section of the fire department. So I wanted to do a broader scope of work. So I took the division chief test and passed that, and got promoted and went to administrative services. So a little bit of overlap in what I did as a captain, in that it was, administrative services deals with labor relations and discipline, but it also had like planning, and what else did I have? IT at one point. They eventually ended up moving the training academy into administrative services, but that was after I'd been there for a couple of years. So mostly what I dealt with was civilian sections of the department. There weren't all that many uniforms that worked under administrative services until the academy came in. And administrative services, so Ed Radcliffe and Beth Sanford were the two uniforms in the labor relations area. But other than that, it was all civilians I worked with. Debbie Shaw, Liberty Martin, all of them. We put on every promotional test, which, oh my God, it's a daunting task, and they do it. And you do it so often. You'd think it was down to a science, and then someone throws a wrench into something, and you got to do it differently. Or
a lot of moving parts.
Just to put on a master test plus a lieutenant test plus. As they go up, it gets a little easier because the master's test is, logistically difficult because there's so many people taking it, and it's a written test as opposed to oral boards. And so, yeah, it's a daunting task, and I think the fire department should appreciate their administrative people a little bit better.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess if you never see them work, you only see the product. I had the advantage of seeing all the work that went into all that stuff. So, yeah, they do a great job.
Yeah, I think that's kind of an inherent blind spot that everyone that works in the field has. Is, all is the field, and your station, your little corner of the department, but there's so many moving parts that allow us to do what we do and support all the things that we do.
Right. And people would say to me all the time, like, well, why can't we do this? And so there are reasons, and I would start explaining them, and then they'd be like, oh, never mind. They're like, they don't want to really hear why the true reasons why we can't do it, because there are reasons. It's not someone's up there, throwing darts at a dartboard saying, let's how we can make their life, more difficult. There's reasons behind all the policies that happen. Every single policy has a reason it was developed, a reason it's written like that, a reason why you don't want to change it sometimes, to update them, because there's reasons why you don't do that, because then it might change to something that you don't want it to change to. So there's so much going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Right.
So
was it hard for you to stay connected to people in the field? Because I know, like, I'm a float lieutenant, and so I'm different firehouses all the time, and even before floating in different assignments that I was in, I would hear people say, well, administration is disconnected from
Yeah.
what's going on in the field. Did you find it difficult to stay connected with what was going on in the field?
Yes. Yeah, it is. It's very difficult to stay connected and to be out there and to, you know, it's difficult to not be like, okay, they don't know why we're doing this, but they don't need to know why we're doing, like, what I'm saying? It's easy to say, just easier if we just do it and tell them that's what they have to do rather than explain to them why it is. But there's so many advantages to trying to get them to understand why something is happening rather than just, this is a new policy and take it and read it and do it. So I always did try and, do sessions where we would explain things to people, explain why things happen. But yeah, I didn't on a regular basis spend a lot of time in the field after that. So yeah, it is easy to get disconnected with what's happening and it takes effort to keep everyone educated. And so if you're busy and that's one of the things that might slip, and that's probably not a good one to slip. You do want people to understand why the department's doing something that they're doing. But yeah, it's sometimes easy to let that slip and be like, I'm just so busy. I don't have time to explain all the whys, whens, and hows. It just do it. So, and I understand why the street people don't like that, and I don't blame them. And I was the same way when I was on the street. I was forever going, why are they doing this? So
right.
It's natural.
Yeah. It's kind of like at the station, especially if you have a busy shift, like you may have a plan for the day, but you start running calls and calls and calls, and now that plan is thrown out the window. And so it sounds like administratively it's kind of the same thing. You're like, oh, I'd love to stay in touch with the field folks, but like you're not just sitting around behind a desk twiddling your thumbs. Like you're doing things.
Exactly. I got a lot of things to do. Right. So yeah.
Isn't that whole everywhere you go, they say morale is low. Everywhere you go, everywhere they say morale is low all the time. Since I've been in, I've heard that my entire career.
Yeah, well, that's funny because I never felt that. I
didn't feel it. I didn't feel like morale is low. I never felt it.
Like I never felt the guys at 23 were like, oh, we're so miserable. Like, yeah, they would, bitch and moan about something that knew that they'd have to do, but it was gone in, a day. Like I never felt morale was bad at any of the stations I worked in, like for the street people, it really wasn't. It never felt like they were, upset. I think I don't know.
At the station level, I mean, if you do what you're supposed to do and that relationships are good within each other, that day is good. Those calls you learn from them and you get a lot out of them, and morale is good. Morale doesn't come from somewhere else. You make morale. Morale's right there on the ground floor. Yeah. You expecting someone to bring you morale, you got to be motivated yourself, or the shift needs to be.
Right. And it's interesting about a float lieutenant. Like we didn't have those before. I mean, there was a point where there was no such thing as a float lieutenant. And there is something to be said of the camaraderie of a shift when they're kept together. 23, we were together every day, every night. Like someone might get detailed out here and there, but usually not, because the way the shifts were made is like, well, the Kelly days this, so that, everyone on the shift was so close and it must be very difficult to be a float lieutenant, to go into new situations each time. And you just lose that camaraderie of hanging out when you're not working. And I don't even know if that happens as much anymore as it did back then, where we would, have parties on the weekend and everyone from the shift would be there. So I don't think it happens anymore. Like, does that?
It happens, not as much. I mean, it happens though. It still happens.
And I think it's because keeping everyone together, which is difficult to do in a system this big, right? You got to, there's got to be ways to cover positions when people are out, et cetera, et cetera. But I think that the camaraderie might suffer from that.
Yeah. I can say, because I was the master on Tony's shift for 9 years, and we had a fantastic time.
We
I mean,
did.
just laughing and
Mhm.
running calls and having conversations. And we were a very different, like a diverse group of people, like in many ways,
Mhm.
and we had a lot of different conversations on everything. And sometimes, we disagreed, and sometimes they got a little heated, but we always respected each other, and we always enjoyed just being with each other. And so I think because of that, I don't think morale was ever really low.
Right.
Um, and maybe the people who work with us have a different opinion, but I don't
I
think
know.
so. I mean,
Yeah.
I think everyone enjoyed coming to work and enjoyed just running calls and being with each other. And now as a float, yes, I absolutely miss that. Like, I miss that camaraderie with the same group of people that I can see all the time. But my mindset coming in is, look, I'm going to control what I can control,
Mhm.
and all the other stuff I can't control, I'm not going to worry about it. So if I'm working at a different firehouse where I don't know anybody, well, okay, well, now this is my opportunity to get to know people, and
Mhm.
maybe we can do a drill and we can all learn something together. And we'll, if we run calls, great. If we don't, okay, but we don't have any control over that. So, but hey, we can try to cook something and just sit down and enjoy a meal together. So I found that those kind of things help my morale to stay up, because I know, like, every chance that I come to work is a chance for me to learn different things and meet new people.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a good attitude to have. An attitude brings you a long way in this world.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Man, that's great. So you're there, you get close to the end. What
Yeah.
makes you think it's time to retire?
Oh, I
What
went in the
makes you say?
drop. Well, I was going to be, so my plan was I was going to retire when I was 60. Remember, I came in at 30. So
Yeah.
I wanted to be retired at 60. So I went in the drop 3 years and did the full drop. And then at the end, I was ready to go. My husband had been retired for much longer than I was.
Yeah,
So
he been retired for a
he was,
couple of years at that point,
yeah,
right?
he was in 2011,
Wow.
7 years before me. So yeah, I was ready to go and just not have to work and go on long vacations instead of shorter ones.
Yeah.
So yeah, when I went in the drop, I was ready to go. It went by fast. It really, I mean, my whole career went by fast. It seems like. Here I did
Absolutely.
30 years. I'm like, oh my god,
That is a lot.
that is a lot. But yeah,
30 years a long time.
yeah. But it was quite a ride.
Yes.
Hmm.
Do you remember your last shift?
Well, my last shift at administrative services.
Yeah, I guess as administrative
I'm
services.
like, it's kind of anticlimactic. Like, I
Yeah,
think they had a luncheon and people came and whatever, but it really is much less anticlimactic than the last shift on riding the apparatus. It
right.
really is kind of like I had an office job for 8 to 10 years, so
Yeah,
it was like leaving the office.
gotcha.
So, you know, I mean,
Yeah,
it's sad. It was sad. It's like, like I said, I had a great ride, and it's kind of sad that you're leaving all that. But I think it's easier to leave from an administrative position than it is leaving with day in and day out running calls, and then the next day you're not running calls. I think it's easier,
yeah,
or at
Yeah, I've
least
heard
it
that.
was easier to leave.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah,
Leaving the actually putting your gear away, it's a hard
yeah,
one.
yeah. Like my gear hadn't been needed the spider webs taken out of it, but
Yeah, but you're leaving the fire service, you're leaving that fire
right.
service family.
Yes,
That was a little different.
yeah.
And thinking
It is sad. But
it's a
anyway,
natural progression.
yeah.
hmm
60's old to be in the fire department.
It's time, right?
It's time.
yeah. What was that first month like after you retired?
I can't really remember it. I'm trying to think if we went on a trip. So we love to travel, absolutely love it. So I don't remember like being. I got actually, when one of the things when you're in administrative services and you leave, people call you and they're like, what about this and what about that? And because they're put in a position. Charles Bailey took my spot as division chief in administrative services. So every once in a while he'd be like, and what, like, do you know where this is, or what did we do about this, or you almost can't pass on everything that all the knowledge that you've gotten. So people still do call you for advice or help or something like that. So maybe that made the transition a little easier too. But it was really nice. I mean, being a division chief, I would never have my phone off. I was always on call, and so, I probably remember because we always go to the beach in June for a week. And every other year I had my phone on the beach, like yielding phone calls, doing this, doing that, work, not working hard, but I would not be 100% off. And so the first time I went to the beach and I didn't have to bring my phone. It was like, that was really nice because
I bet.
Well, big difference between leaving the stations, but yeah, the administrative, like I said, I really felt my job was to be on 24/7 call if someone needed something. So that ended. That was nice to end though.
You can finally just be on vacation and realize, okay, I'm done with this.
Yeah, not worry about, yeah. And the division chiefs, whenever the chief went out of town, had to cover for him. So if you were like acting chief for a week or whatever, so then he'd have to field all that stuff while he was gone. So
Gotcha. All right.
Yeah.
So now as you're moving into retirement, and now you get to enjoy this new phase of your life, what do you think was the hardest part for you about being in the fire service, looking back on it?
What's the hardest part? I don't know if it's necessarily the hardest part, but I think there's a difference in between being a woman in the fire service and being you guys in the fire service. And I say that and I'll give you a really good example of civilians and what they think. So even civilians. So I went to do the TSA pre-check, like once I was still working and Jay was retired. And I went to go, so you have to be interviewed by some federal agent who decides whether you get to be TSA pre-checked.
Right.
So Jay and I went together, and he went up to the counter first, and the guy says, so it said retired here. What do you do for a living? And Jay said, I retired. I used to be in fire rescue. The guy says, thank you for your service. So, so then now I come up and I'm still working. So on mine, it doesn't say retired. It says Division Chief, Montgomery County Fire Rescue Service. And the guy goes, you're in the fire department? And I said, yes. I said, yes, I am. He goes, seriously? You like hoses and all that? Had I been able to go across the counter, but now he's controlling my TSA pre-check, so I can't.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, my husband thinks it's the funniest thing since I'm like, what happened to thank you for your service? So he just had this notion that I couldn't possibly.
No way.
Been a firefighter. No way that I have been a firefighter. So it was always challenging to deal with. And even in the public, when I was a captain on the fire truck and I'd get off the fire truck and, we get off for alarm bells. And for the 5th time, and I went up to the property owner and I'm like, look, you got to do something. I'm like, not yelling at him, but I'm like, look. And he's like talking over me to my master firefighter. And I'm like, I'm right here. Like, I'm the one you need to talk to. So it was challenging that, things that you don't even think about being a woman in the fire service is interesting.
Well, yeah. So, you talked about your career, and I didn't really ask, what do you think were some of your mentors in your career?
I would say my mentors. Probably Griff Livingston, I would put high up there. And even all the masters at 23 and the lieutenants, like they really helped me so much in my career. like administratively, definitely Dave Steckel was a really good mentor for me. Mary Beth Micus was at least, there was a woman in the fire department that was, going up in rank. But, but she was never on the fireside. She came up, in ranks, before she was only a paramedic and never ever rode a fire truck. She came up
pre-transition.
So there really was no females that were really high in rank that I could, that could take me under their wing. Denise Peugeot, she was probably one of the first ones. She got to be assistant chief. But I couldn't necessarily see a lot of happening to a lot of women. So, I hope to change that, but and I would say one thing, I was in charge of all the hiring for the department when I was in administrative services and struggled to get women to apply to the fire department and struggle. I mean, we would actively so much, I was really wanting that to happen. I wanted recruit classes that I had that had like 8 women or 10 women in their class, because I think of these poor women who there's one in a recruit class and she goes into the locker room by herself after all that physical stuff, all that yelling, all that boys town, and she's by herself, no one to help her process that all and lift her up and stuff. So, but it's really hard to get women to want to join the fire department.
Yeah, it still is.
Still is. And I'm like, we would do outreach and I'm like, it's the greatest career. And,
we have a hard time just getting regular candidates now.
I know. Well, yeah, I guess. Right.
Yeah.
But to get women to be in the fire department, I kept thinking if they only knew how great it was, they'd come. They'd be knocking down the door. But yeah. So probably my biggest challenge was the female part of being in the fire department. Although, it didn't stop me from doing anything. It just gave me a new perspective.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What would you say to any women who are listening now, who are new to the department and maybe they're in the recruit class, or maybe they're young on the job, maybe first year, second year? What would you say to them?
That they need to be I say the word assertive, but you need to be focused on your career and have a plan and move it forward, and don't wait. And the other example I give all the time, because I ran promotional exams, is I'd go to the guys in the field and I'd be like, so you taking the lieutenant's test, you taking the master's, you taking this, and they'd be like, yep, 2 years and I'm taking that next test. And I'd go to the women and I'd say, so you're taking the test, right? You've been, and they're like, well, I don't know. I want to master this job before I go on to the next job. And I'm like, I get that, but the guys aren't doing that. The guys aren't saying that. They're not hesitating. They're moving up. The guys that want to move up are moving up, and they're moving up when they're able to move up, and they're not looking back. And the women tend to hold back a little bit in interviewing them for the oral parts, because I sat on many a promotional interview panel, and guys would brag on what they did. They would say, we'd be like, what's your greatest accomplishment in the fire department? And they could list 10 of them. And I'd say that, we'd say, same questions to everybody, right? So you'd say it to the female candidates, and they're like, well, and you'd know that they did some really major stuff and they wouldn't even mention it. And I'm like, so a lot of them would say, can I get feedback? I say, yeah, you need to say these things. And they're like, well, I don't want to brag on myself. And I'm like, this is what you need to do. You need to kind of be assertive in this field of work in order, if you want to keep promoting up or keep gaining respect from the different people, you kind of have to put yourself out there and go for it. So, I wish more women would get in the service, and the women who do, I love to see them go up the ranks, and because the higher ranks are where you can really facilitate change. And there are naysayers in the fire department, and you can just ignore them because you outrank them, and you don't have to take their prejudice and take it to heart. You can say, you can think what you want, but my career is going forward regardless of you. So I wish women would kind of be more gung-ho about
right.
their career.
Amen.
Amen.
Mm-hmm.
So now you're looking at yourself, you're retired, and you get up in the morning after a long trip to Australia, wherever you're going, and come back. And you drink your cup of coffee and you're looking in the mirror. Who do you see looking back at you?
Oh, I see someone who did 30 years and absolutely loved it, had a wonderful career from start to finish. I see someone it's okay to be done with all that at my age. Right. And, I find things that, we travel a whole lot, but I volunteer at DC Public Schools in a reading tutoring program for kids who are below grade level, and one-on-one tutoring with them, which I absolutely adore and love, and really gives, you really feel like you're making a difference in some kid's life. So I do that when I'm home. And, just live life, loving life. We travel for long periods of time. Like we've been away 6 months at some points. Like we went to live in Italy for 3 months, and people say, "How can you do that?" And I'm like, just do it, just go. You can do it.
You can do it. Yeah,
you can do it. So yeah, we're living the dream right here now. Kids are all grown and out of the house and gainfully employed. So it's just the two of us. We live in a small DC house. So, and people think I'm crazy for living in DC. We absolutely love it.
Yeah, no. I remember when you moved down there. Yeah, you was telling me.
It's a different lifestyle because like you walk everywhere. We own one car and we never use it. Like we either walk, somewhere, or Uber or Metro, and it's a different lifestyle than living, getting in a car every time you want to go to the grocery store. Okay. So, and I like this lifestyle. Keeps you young.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Good.
Yeah. Well, Chief Diane Zuspan, we thank you so very much for sitting down with us and talking. It's been incredible to hear your story. And I thank you for just setting the example. I know representation matters, especially in higher up positions. And so if there's any women that are listening to this that doubt that they can succeed highly, I mean, they have no further to look than yourself. I mean, you definitely set the example. So thank you for being such a great example and having a great career.
All right. Well, thank you guys.
Yeah. And yes, Diane, 30 years. And thank you for your service, Diane.
Finally, someone said.
Job well done.
Yeah. And if someone wanted to get in touch with you, how could they get in touch with you?
Email. My mobile phone number is the same as it was when I was with the department, if someone still has it. But yeah, I mean, someone can email me and I'll call them, and we can get in touch. I would be more than happy to talk to anyone who wants to talk about, wants to bounce some ideas off someone or get some advice. I'd be more than happy to. So it's Diane Zuspan at Comcast.net.
Okay.
Okay.
Excellent. Well, Chief, thank you again so much for sitting down with us and talking with us. We really appreciate you sharing your story with us. Thank you.
Thanks again, Diane.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening to the When the Smoke Clears podcast. If you want to get in touch with us, you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube. Just search for the When the Smoke Clears podcast. Or you can email us at whenthesmokeclears8@gmail.com. That's whenthesmokeclears and the number 8 @gmail.com.